Hello, Conf42 attendees. Welcome to my talk on Guardrails First, a framework for designing safe, scalable, and accountable AI agents for security ops. Let's dive right in. The first thing you may be wondering is, why do I care about security operations as a DevOps person? And let me assure you, and I'm willing to bet money on this, is that your security operations colleagues will come to you seeking your help to build, deploy AI agents literally this year. And when that happens, my hope is by spending the next 30 or so minutes with me, you will find yourself much better equipped to help them and your organization succeed with AI in security operations. What qualifies me as a presenter on this topic? First off, I have over 5 years of experience across the leading security operations companies building solutions for practitioners. Proofpoint, Zscaler, Splunk, and Cisco are just some of the names that I've worked at. Secondly, I talk to over 150 security operations teams every single year of all shapes and sizes, including large Fortune 500 organizations with mature practices, as well as organizations that are literally building a SOC for the first time. I know a thing or two about security operations. Now, the thing with security operations is, even before Gen AI happened, there were massive challenges. Teams were faced with alert fatigue, tool sprawl, and there was a widening skills shortage where there were so many jobs but not enough skilled people to be able to man these posts needed to keep organizations secure. And then Gen AI happened in 2022, making this all even worse because AI made it easy for attackers to launch attacks faster, scale them better, and also lowered the skill required to be able to launch really massive attacks, right? And that basically made the challenge for security operations terms, which was already a very bad situation, even more worse. The good news, though, or the slight silver lining, is AI and AI agents in particular also present a possible solution, and in my mind, are an absolute necessity for SOC teams to be able to keep up with the increased demands off of them. So, AI presents a massive opportunity, but the challenge with security operations or just security in general is you are paid to be right every single time. And LLMs that are non deterministic, have high amounts of variability, and could be wrong at times are really not a recipe for success in security operations. So, how do we actually realize this opportunity despite all of the difficulties and challenges? And there are two broad set of options, but really it's buy or build. I don't think the decision of whether you choose to buy or whether you choose to build your own is really the most fundamental decision. That said, there are a plenty of options out there from both perspectives where there are many startups that have spun up and are trying to build AI SOC platforms, as evidenced on my slide there. There's typically also going to be good ICs in your organization. It could be a security engineer, it could be a SOC analyst who has built a prototype that tries to use AI agents, deploy AI agents to help alleviate some of the pressure that SOC teams are feeling. However, the challenge that you're going to find is all of these solutions demo very similarly and demo really well. However, when it comes to building trust to be able to productionize these solutions, that's where you're going to have a really hard time. And the goal behind this talk and introducing the Guardrails First framework is to give you a methodology for how you may go about deploying these agents in production so that you are successful in your endeavors, right? And there are four pillars to this approach. Firstly, making sure that context about your organization is front and center in the design. Appropriate policy controls are in place so that you're not looking at adverse outcomes if you get suboptimal results. Solution needs to be designed with trust and auditability in mind. And then lastly, it needs to be human in the loop for critical actions that it may take, which may pose potential harm to your organization if done incorrectly. Let's double click into this framework and see it in action. Let's talk about the first pillar, which is organizational context. Now, I'll tell you this from my years of experience working with security operations teams. The process for triaging or investigating an identical alert is never the same or never exactly the same across two different organizations. Depending on the security tools that they own, how their data is structured, and what their standard operating procedures looks like, you will have a very different set of standards that need to be followed to triage and investigate literally the exact same alert across two different organizations. And that's where AI really needs to begin. So, as you think about building AI agents in your own organization, you need to leverage all of the context about your organization in training data for your AI agents. And what do I mean by that? The first part of this is you need to leverage all of the human knowledge in your environment for things that have already been triaged or investigated. So, what I mean by that is you probably have a plethora of case notes that indicate processes currently being followed to triage and investigate various types of alerts in your organization. Secondly, you probably have lead SOC analysts who are able to write pretty detailed SOPs or standard operating procedures for how they go about investigating specific types of alerts that originate from various detections in your environment. And both of those serve as key training material to help your AI agents, both from a RAG or prompting context, succeed in your own environment and understand the nuances of what investigation or evidence is really required to be successful. One thing I will warn you from talking to all of these teams is that you may already have a standard set of SOPs that are written, but as you start building AI agents, you're likely to discover that there are gaps in those SOPs, not just from the perspective that some steps are being missed, but also from the standpoint of, hey, if an AI agent is really to understand these, some of the steps may need to be rewritten without corporate jargon that AI may have no path to succeed. And the third thing I will say is anytime you are going to go ahead and deploy this agent, and this may sound really basic, but anytime you're deploying an increment, make sure you have a very robust back testing pipeline where this AI agent can disposition alerts or analyze alerts that have already been labeled by your security operations team from a manual investigation and triage process. So, a backtesting pipeline is an absolute must third element. This is how organizational context can really be at the center of the AI learning curriculum and help AI agents actually be practically useful in your production environment. The second pillar that I want to talk about is policy constraints. You do know that AI at times can produce less than ideal, unpredictable outcomes. And that's where policy can really be a CYA with capability scope tools, policy driven gating, human oversight, and decision provenance being built into sort of the design of your AI agents or one that you procure. Now, what do I mean by capability scope tools? The first thing is decide what the boundary really is. Is this a tool that is trying to perform enrichment, or is this an agent that's trying to go update tickets? Is it one that's gonna go take response actions in your environment? If it is one that is purely going to do enrichment, make sure that it is scoped down to only have access to tools that allow it to do enrichment. That way, you are able to limit your blast radius in case it ever reaches the wrong conclusion, where you may not want it to go take a response action, locking out a user account or locking out a domain controller, which makes your entire organization go dark. Things like that could happen, and you want to make sure that you are building in controls in your architecture to prevent that from happening. So, all of these AI agents need to be scoped or need to be exposed to tools that are scoped down to specific purposes in terms of what they are permitted to achieve. Next, you should have some level of policy driven gating where AI is able to come up with a proposal. It is evaluated against various policies that you have in place, and a decision is made on whether this is supposed to be escalated for human review, whether this is supposed to be automatically executed, or even if it is automatically executed, that it actually had the right in outcome of that execution. So policy constraints or policy driven gating is an important part of that design. Now, all of this organizational context and policy is great, but how do you build trust? And this is one of those areas where over time, I think you will have to do less because AI will just, the tooling should just get better and better over time. And people, as they embrace this new technology, will be more trusting of it than they are at the moment. The things that I would advocate for is when you're looking at either buying or building, your own AI agents for security operations, make sure that you have access to a full audit trail. This includes an entire timeline of every step the AI agent took, right from what data it used to arrive at its conclusions, how did it reason past that data, what are all the actions that it took, and then what was the final outcome that it suggested. 100% traceability and auditability is a must have when it comes to succeeding with AI agents in production in your environment. Make sure you hold that bar of any solution that is either being built internally or being procured if you want to be able to succeed in a manner where you're truly able to augment your SOC analyst with AI agents to help investigate and triage. And lastly, from a adoption roadmap standpoint, I would advocate for taking a very human in the loop oriented approach. And a practical way of achieving that is any solution you deploy, I would advocate to begin it pretty much in shadow mode where it is accessible to a subset of security operations leads in your environment, not even the entire security operations team, where AI is silently making recommendations on what it would have a particular alert or finding as, and that is just evaluated by some of your best SOC analysts or SOC leads to find if the reasoning and the conclusions actually hold up. The second phase I would advocate for is to go ahead and allow AI to make proposals pretty much on your where your analysts sit, where it is able to go suggest potential things to do based on its investigation outcomes to all of your security operations analysts. However, there's by no means a mandatory, it's no, by no means mandatory to accept the suggestions provided by AI. In fact, they are encouraged to audit these and then decide which ones they would actually want to go and apply. Now, once you've gone past this point where you've built a fair amount of trust and you think AI is pretty much reaching the right conclusions and your team knows how to leverage some of those conclusions to accelerate their workflows, I would consider giving it a little bit more bounded autonomy where it's able to autonomously perform low risk actions that would not lock out people in your organization or cause severe detriment. And that sort of bounded autonomy is provided to it. And then lastly, I do not see a world where you would fully let AI go and execute a large detrimental action with the technology as it exists today. So providing continuous feedback and making sure that it is able to grow in trust and reach that point is the fourth phase where I would love to keep pushing in terms of expanding the scope of that bounded autonomy to be more wider with time. So those are the four pillars: organizational context for training, policy constraints to limit downside, auditability to build trust, and a roadmap that begins pretty much with your SOC leads, then graduates to your entire SOC team, and is bounded in terms of scope of autonomy that it has, while that scope continues to expand and grow over time, where you're able to just take things off your plate and put it on the AI agents. All right. So that's the framework. How do you know if you implemented that framework correctly and have an AI agent that actually works well in production, delivering the outcomes you want? So first off, you obviously want to check, hey, were you able to eliminate a lot of the false positives that your team is looking at? Reduce your MTTR, mean time to analyze, with all of the AI provided output. Did that provide or manifest as an analyst productivity gain? Pick your favorite metric for how you measure analyst productivity. It could be tickets that they triaged in a shift, whatever they did. And then at a very base level, obviously you want to know how accurate were the recommendations as well as the reasoning of what the AI produced, right? And then from a actual blueprint standpoint, I would recommend you take these 6 phases or 6 stages, right? First off, assess the current state of your knowledge base and your documentation. Like I said, the first pillar is organizational context. Hey, do you even have your existing SOC workflows documented really well? The next phase I would recommend is find a narrow scope. Like, in fact, start really small. Hey, here's an area where we are feeling some amount of pain. It's relatively low risk. It would be great to go and let the AI agent loose on this, right? Particularly in talking to some of the security operations teams, I've heard areas like employee reported phishing emails be considered relatively low risk. for things that people would consider automating and having some level of automation around. The third thing would be to see what kind of guardrails do you need in place? What kind of capability scoped tools do you need? What kind of policies do you need to make sure that, hey, even if AI reaches the wrong conclusion, the impact to your organization is not catastrophic. With that, you'd go ahead and develop your AI models or AI agents and then deploy them in some sort of shadow mode with your lead SOC analysts where there is no impact on any of your UI or work surface where your analysts operate today. Fifth phase would be to deploy them in a manner where it's able to make suggestions to analysts in the UI that they operate in, and over time expand its autonomy so that it's able to achieve better automation outcomes for you. So these would be the 6 phases in which how I would approach a build project, or even if it's a buy project, implementation of a project like that. Hopefully that was helpful. I do think the key takeaway from this conversation, hopefully, is that while AI agents have a lot of promise, there is a path where these AI agents can be deployed in a safe, scalable manner, but human centricity is still at the forefront, right? So as long as you start with a small scope, which can be expanded over time, you're going to be able to succeed and get off the ground a lot faster. You need to be able to measure whether you're actually hitting the outcomes you're after. What is the accuracy of the recommendations that the AI is making? How much efficiency is it able to add to your workflow? You want to make sure that humans are in the loop in terms of making all of the key decisions while you expand the scope of AI. And then as you build this trust, you need to be on a journey where you're constantly expanding the scope of what autonomy means for AI agents deployed in your environment. Hopefully that was helpful. So, you as a DevOps person, when you do get your security operations teams coming to you, pretty much as I promised this year, asking you to help build and deploy AI agents, you're able to help them succeed and help your organization succeed at this endeavor. Thank you so much for the time.